And I'm reading the article here again from bestcolleges.com. It says student loan debt by race. This is how they broke it down. And it says, first line when you read the article, Black adults carry the highest level of student loan debt and are most likely to face repayment barriers. And that, speaks directly to what I was just saying because, a lot of Black people were already tussling with payments pre-pandemic.
The people's voice.
Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the people's voice. I am Trey Evans and I am the people's voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time out to listen to the podcast over the past year and a half or so. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time out to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be doing something else with your time, so we do appreciate you giving us attention here for the next 20, 30 minutes. As always, if this information is enlightening and you feel that it is valuable, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast. We put out a new episode each and every Friday on all podcast platforms, and we put out a video on YouTube each and every week as well. So as always, thank you and welcome. So today I want to talk about student loans. And I want to talk about student loans because, here in the last couple of weeks, I've been focusing on education. Obviously, it's back to school time, so a lot of these topics are top of mind for me. But I came across a study that was recently released that talked about the disparities in terms of student loans and the disparities between each class of people here in the United States, between white people, Black people, Asians, and Latinos, and all other races. And so I wanted to talk about that today because I thought that the information that was provided was eye-raising, to say the least. And, the interesting thing about it is that, for those who may not know, I don't know if you're in the United States that you haven't heard the story, but, for about 2-3 years, there was a moratorium on student loan payments. So basically, student loan payments mandatory student loan payments had come to a pause because, because of the COVID pandemic. And then, of course, Joe Biden and his administration kind of utilized that as a campaign promise that they would work on getting student loan debt eliminated, or there would be some form of loan forgiveness. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I say unfortunately because I know too many people who still have student loans and are, working with student loans. That didn't happen. And so as a result of that, the student loan repayment process is subject to start here, I think, in the next month or so. And I talked about this as well previously on the podcast that, our economy is going to be a lot of tough times for a lot of people because not only did the payments stop, but during that time period, a lot of people, unfortunately accumulated even more debt. A lot of people went and bought houses during that period where there was no repayments. They bought cars. A lot of people went on vacation. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. But, now, as the saying goes, it's time to pay the piper. And, this is going to be, you're going to hear about this here during the next year about some tough times for a lot of people, unfortunately. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So today I want to talk about student loans and kind of student loans, and the different effect that it has on each class of people. Again, I was reading this article here from bestcolleges.com, and they did a great breakdown of the current crisis. And I say crisis. I'm not using that. I'm not using that term ill-advised, because it literally is a crisis. But they kind of detailed what that looks like in terms of how many people of each class and race of people have student loans. So I kind of want to highlight that, and then we'll go from there. So, and I'll just pull this up so we can kind of see it all together. And bear with me a little bit. I'm using some new technology today, so it might be a little spotty. But yeah, so bestcolleges.com did this study where they went through what student loan looks like in terms of who's carrying how much debt, and what race of people are carrying the most debt. And based on this study, and I'm reading the article here again from bestcolleges.com, it says student loan debt by race. This is how they broke it down. And it says, first line when you read the article, Black adults carry the highest level of student loan debt and are most likely to face repayment barriers. And that, speaks directly to what I was just saying, because, a lot of Black people were already tussling with payments pre-pandemic. Moratorium comes in, payments stop. Fortunately, a lot of people, and I just say a lot of people that I know, right? I don't want to just blanket people, but a lot of people that I know, unfortunately, stopped. When they said the payment stopped, they stopped paying. And that debt doesn't go anywhere. Just because there's no payments doesn't mean the debt goes. It means just that they stopped the payments while they were trying to figure out, what would be the course of action based on Joe Biden's request to have student loan forgiveness. Anyway, so this breakdown here by Best Colleges, and they did a great job. They really detailed it with a ton of graphs where you can really see the numbers and see the disparity, if you will, between white borrowers and Black borrowers, Hispanics and Asians, Latinos, things of that nature. But one of the things that stood out to me immediately, well, let me first say, one of the things that immediately stood out to me was the fact that here in the United States, African Americans only represent 13%, 14% of the population. It's 340 million plus people here, and African Americans around 40, 45, somewhere in the middle there, in terms of citizens here in the country, at least those that have been identified as African Americans. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm not going to get into it, but being that we only represent 13% of the population, the fact that we have the highest amount of student loan debt really had me questioning and scratching my head. So I'm like, well, why is that occurring? And, I started doing a little bit of research, and I came across a couple of articles. There's actually a lot of information out there about this, because I did not know that it was this widespread. But I'm reading an article here from Investopedia.com, and it says, again, and they're basically quoting the same thing from bestcolleges.com, but it says, which race ethnicity has the highest student loan debt? And they say, again, Black adults have the highest student loan debt. They said for the majority of indicators, Black adults held the highest spot, including student loan borrowing rates, default rates, and average debt. And it said these numbers highlight the racial wealth gap in college and after. And I, when I read that, that was one of the things that stood out to me, because there's been so many conversations about the wealth gap here in the United States. And, there's been tons of documented stories, which, are all true about the difference or, the disparity between compensation, between white people and black people and Asian people and things of that nature. That still to this day is occurring. But then when you throw into the mix that student loans are now in that mix, that really puts a damper on being able to acquire wealth. I was reading somewhere that it said that, after post-college, one of the biggest issues is that, because typically student loans are predicted to be paid off between 10 and 30 years. The recommended or assumed time is 10 years, but, many don't pay their student loans off within 10 years. So now you think about it, and we're just going to, just go from a standard, if you will. Kid gets in college at 18 years old, takes out student loans. If that individual graduates within 4 years, right? I'm just trying to do some rough math. And they are scheduled to then, on best case scenario, pay that off in 10 years. That kid graduates at 22. They're supposed to be paying that off by the age of 32. Doesn't account for the kid gets out of school, gets a crappy job, doesn't account for has to try to support living in an apartment, gets a car, doesn't incorporate all of the other accumulation of debt that occurs around that one set of debt. And as a result of that, what has happened is that not only are African Americans dealing with not being able to pay these debts off within 10 years, but what's end up happening is that this is being extended far beyond 10 years. There was one study here from bestcolleges.com where they broke down the period of payment. And I'm scrolling through here just for you guys listening on the podcast. But here it is. So there's a graph here that shows the percentage of people age 18 to 39 who paid off their student loans. Again, remember, they assume that most people will be able to pay these loans off within 10 years. But the actuality is that that is not occurring. So this graph here that I'm reading from bestcolleges.com, it says percentage of people 18 to 39 who paid off their student loans. And African Americans are at the bottom of this list in terms of individuals who have paid off their student loans within the period of 18 to 39. Literally, black borrowers are at 11%, and then you have Asian borrowers who pay off their student loans between 18 and 39 at a rate of 52%. So that wealth gap that is being created is not just being created because of poor job opportunities. This has a lot to do with the fact that there is another component that is in place that's really squeezing the resources of black people here in the United States. Matter of fact, many people may not know this, but behind the second largest debt for Americans in the United States is student loan debt, right behind mortgage. So you have mortgages and then you have student loan debt. So why is this occurring, right? Why is this occurring? Well, one of the things that is occurring is, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, is the corporate model of higher education, which higher education is a business now. And just like any business, oftentimes it targets individuals who they want to sell their services to. And a lot of times, private universities and many of these larger universities that everybody flocks to, they specifically target African Americans, right? Offer them partial scholarships to subsidize outrageous high tuition rates, knowing that these individuals will have to take out a loan to try to pay this. And this, again, this is a targeted effort. This is not by accident. Another reason is that, and I'm reading here from Investopedia.com, it says, why is American student debt so high? And now they're just talking about in general. It says there are a few factors behind high American student debt. These include the rising cost of tuition, the growing availability of federal loans, and wage stagnation. Now, again, as African Americans, there's already a discrepancy in terms of the amount of compensation that is provided for the same jobs. Yes, today in 2023, there is still a wage gap based on race. This is not, I tell you guys all the time, I don't do conspiracy theorists. That's not my thing. This is actual data. I'm not going to highlight it here in this conversation because I want to stay on topic, but this is definitely occurring. In terms of the wealth gap, as I was saying, the wealth gap has to do with, in terms of wage stagnation. The reason why debt is so high is also because of the rising cost of tuition, but also the availability of student loans. And student loans are targeted towards Black people. I'm just telling you, and the numbers support what I'm saying. Another interesting thing here is that in terms of the rate of student loans, not only just the rate, but in terms of who ends up with the student loans. Because oftentimes what ends up happening is that many people assume that student loans are just carried by students who went to college and they graduated and now they're out in the world, because it's supposed to be a form of upward mobility. But oftentimes those student loans that are owed by individuals who have not graduated college. Matter of fact, let me play this clip here from, this is from PBS NewsHour. They interviewed Jalil Mustafa Bishop. He's an assistant professor at Villanova University, and he talked about this. Take a listen to what he said about who actually owns these student loans, especially when it comes to African Americans, and then we'll go from there.
Patient, young college graduates, but that the promise fundamentally hasn't paid off. So when we know that 40% of student borrowers still are carrying student debt but no degree, that's an issue, because fundamentally, without that degree, the return is hard to justify around student debt. And we know that some of that is because we have institutions, particularly for-profit institutions, that engage in predatory or recruiting practices that bring particularly many students of color into their institutions without any real support to graduation, to earning that credential. I think that.
Yeah, and as you heard him say, predatory lending. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, wait a second, predatory lending is payday loans and high interest rate car loans. No, this is a targeted effort. I'm telling you guys, this is a targeted effort that has been aimed at African Americans, and it is substantially affecting the quality of life and the ability to generate wealth over a long period of time, because literally family after family is stuck in having to pay these high interest rates. Paying back these student loans that can't afford them because the job opportunities either A, haven't come as a result of graduating, or B, many times graduation hasn't taken place, but these student loans are still required to be paid. I think I'm going to do a part two of this. I'll stop here because it's a lot of information, and I don't want to, bore you to death. But I do want everyone who is in the sound of my voice, please to be aware that the student loan repayment process is beginning, and it is crucial that you take the time to figure out what your payment plan is going to be, and to make sure that you're able to pay off those student loans, because it is crippling Black families and wealth building and generational wealth building. So, I really wanted to talk about that today, get the message out. This is really not one of those podcasts today where I'm just going to, give solutions. This is really, let's raise the flag and alert everyone to, what's going on. Let's, I can't just sign off without giving some solutions, but it's so crucial that you save. It is so crucial that you save. Once you decide to have children and you want them to go to college, you got to do it early and you got to do it often. And it's a sacrifice. Having children is a sacrifice. And so when it comes to student loans, when it comes to college, it's one of those sacrifices that you have to make as a parent. But the best way is to save money early, invest money early, make sure that you are doing the research to find out which college is best for your situation. I get that they want to go to the so-called highly ranked university, but that might not be in your plans or in their financial plans. And so there are always other ways to finance this without having to take student loans. Of course, there's grants and scholarships, but I'm talking about for those who haven't, gone that route or don't have the ability to earn those type of merits. It is important that you save, invest, and do as much as you can to reduce the need to take out these student loans, because as you heard the professor there say, it is very, very predatory what is occurring regarding these student loans. So that's my time for today. As always, if this information is valuable, we do ask that you share it. You can reach me on any of the social media platforms. I am available at I am Trey Evans on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You could also reach us at the show podcast, which is the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram and on LinkedIn as well. So again, thank you for your time today. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.
People's Voice.